Coming up on this Tuesday edition of NEWSLINE at Noon, President Park Geun-hye meets with the leader of Kuwait, promising to boost cooperation in renewable energy and the Gulf state's large-scale infrastructure projects. There are fears a Korean-Canadian pastor has been detained in North Korea as his family and church have not heard from him in over a month. First, Iraqi forces launch a massive military campaign to recapture the city of Tikrit from Islamic State fighters. These stories and more on NEWSLINE at Noon.
It's noon Tuesday, March 3rd here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this lunchtime is about President Park Geun-hye's tour to the Middle East. On the first stop of her four-nation trip, the Korean leader secured a few deals that will hopefully boost Seoul's economic cooperation with Kuwait.
Now, one of the deals will allow Korea to export its energy technology to the oil-rich country for a change. Our Chae-Sun, who is traveling with the president, filed this report from Kuwait City.
Kuwait, sitting on the northern edge of the Arabian Peninsula, is Korea's #2 supplier of both crude oil and liquefied petroleum gas. But like other Middle Eastern countries, Kuwait is seeking ways to reduce its dependence on petroleum by diversifying its industries. Meeting the Kuwaiti Amir for the first time, President Park Geun-hye said Kuwait's diversification initiative is very similar to our economic plan in that they both aim to build new growth engines through creativity and innovation. The two sides signed a deal in which the state-run Korea Electric Power Corporation will supply power-deficient Kuwait with its smart grid technology system that can store renewable energy to meet the rising demand. This latest initiative will help Korea export energy to the region for a change. With the signing of other deals to send experts and share know-how, Seoul has opened the door for Korean companies to partake in Kuwait's national infrastructure projects. One Korean consortium anticipates winning more than half of Kuwait's $14 billion refinery project in the first half of this year, while other Korean firms are looking to win bids in a $22 billion subway construction venture. Responding to President Park's request to support Korean firms in that respect, the Kuwaiti Amir said he looks forward to their active participation in Kuwaiti projects. Kuwait is the only Gulf nation that has a North Korean embassy, and there are some 4,000 North Korean workers residing here. So it was important that President Park secured greater cooperation with Kuwait on resolving the North Korean nuclear issue and bringing stability to the Korean peninsula. Chae-Sun, Arirang News, Kuwait City.
A Korean-Canadian pastor has been missing for more than a month now after he entered North Korea on a humanitarian mission. Now, this is raising fears he could be being held against his will in the country. People from his church in Toronto say he was a man who just wanted to help the North Korean people. Hang Seung-hee reports.
It wasn't his first visit to North Korea. Korean-Canadian pastor Reverend Lee Hyun-soo had made numerous trips to oversee a nursing home, a nursery, and an orphanage in North Korea's northeastern city of Rajin. That's why his Toronto-based Light Korean Presbyterian Church wasn't initially worried when they lost contact with him. After last hearing from him on January 31st, the church expected him to be out of contact until February 4th. When Im didn't contact them, members of the church waited another 21 days to allow for a possible Ebola quarantine. North Korea's anti-Ebola measures require foreign visitors to be placed under quarantine for 3 weeks. Im had been involved in a variety of missionary projects in North Korea for more than 20 years. The Canadian government says consular officials are in contact with Im's family, but declined to comment on Im's situation. North Korea takes a hard line against religion of any sort, seeing it as a threat to the ruling Kim dynasty. While a UN report estimates up to 400,000 of North Korea's 24 million population are Christians, that number is impossible to verify because none of them can freely practice their religion. In 2007, a Korean-Canadian pastor was detained by North Korean authorities for worshipping in public. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has slammed North Korea for its human rights abuses, saying tens of thousands of people are living as virtual slaves. In his keynote speech at the 28th UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on Monday, Kerry said there is no freedom of expression in the North since Kim Jong-un executes anyone who disagrees with him. He added that for decades, the North Korean government has subjugated its citizens by starving them and torturing them, during which hundreds of thousands lost their lives. Kerry said the report published by the Commission of Inquiry on North Korea's human rights record last year led to a clear condemnation of what is happening inside that country.
The United States has stressed that it doesn't take sides in the historical tensions between countries in Northeast Asia after a U.S. official recently suggested some national leaders play on history to win political capital. Connie Kim reports.
The United States government has moved to clarify recent controversial comments made by a senior U.S. official and reiterated that its stance on historical tensions in Northeast Asia remains the same. This comes a matter of days after U.S. Undersecretary of State Wendy Sherman said leaders should refrain from stirring up nationalist feelings or earning political points by disparaging a former enemy. Her remarks were seen as being directed at South Korea and China, who criticized Japan for denying its wartime atrocities, such as its sexual enslavement of women. And looking to diffuse a controversy, the U.S. State Department said Sherman's comments were not directed at a particular leader. The department's deputy spokesperson added that South Korea and Japan are Washington's most important U.S. allies in East Asia, and that constructive relations between them are helpful for peace and prosperity in the region.
Obviously, our three countries share a lot in common, and in no way was she speaking about any one person or any one country.
The State Department also told Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency that historical issues should be dealt with in a manner that promotes healing and reconciliation. It emphasized that Japan's past statements apologizing to the victims of its wartime aggression were an important chapter in improving relations with neighboring countries. Experts say the U.S. government wants Korea and Japan to get along better in the face of China's growing military presence in East Asia. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
China's biggest annual political gathering is kicking off this Tuesday. The meeting covers numerous topics and is divided into two big sessions: the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and the National People's Congress. But what's captured the attention of the world is the possible expansion of China's military budget. Kwon So-ah reports.
Military spending is sure to be one of the hot topics on the table at this year's two major political meetings in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping's vision for a strong China includes building a stronger army.
National defense modernization is the key to modern warfare. It's like the nerves inside the body.
China's military spending had been on the decline until 2013, but increased by 12% last year to more than $130 billion, putting China behind top military spender the United States. China's defense budget is expected to increase again this year, especially given the country's involvement in a territorial dispute with Japan over an island chain in the East China Sea, and Tokyo's announcement earlier this year of its biggest defense budget ever.
An expansion of military power according to a nation's economic growth is inevitable. The same goes for China.
There is global interest in the upcoming announcement as many countries try to narrow the gap in military spending with China. China's 2015 defense budget is expected to be unveiled on the opening day of the National People's Congress on Thursday. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, and Thursday that LG Electronics.
After more than 3 years of political wrangling, a comprehensive anti-corruption bill is set to pass the National Assembly's plenary session this afternoon. Once signed into law, public officials, including news reporters and faculty members of private schools, could be hit with up to 3 years in prison if they take money or valuables worth more than 1 million won, roughly $900 from one person in one go. It won't matter if it was in exchange for favors or related to their work. Spouses of public officials will be subject to this new law, but not their immediate or extended family members. The parties also decided to allow a 1.5-year grace period for enforcement of the law from the date of its passage, as proposed by the government. Consumer prices in Korea last month grew at the slowest pace in nearly 16 years. Data released by Statistics Korea shows that prices went up by a mere 0.5% from a year earlier in February, growing in the 0% range for the third month in a row. Officials attributed the low growth to the recent drop in global oil prices, which has dragged down domestic oil prices by over 5% during this period. Some analysts have voiced concerns about the possibility of deflation, while others have ruled it out, citing the fact that core inflation, which excludes petroleum products, grew by 2.3% from a year ago. Now, it may sound ironic, but despite sluggish domestic demand, credit card spending by Koreans overseas set a new record last year. Experts cite a surge in international travel as one of the key factors that had an impact. Shin Se-min explains.
Koreans' overseas credit card spending set a record-breaking high of $12.2 billion last year. Data released by the Bank of Korea Tuesday shows that the figure jumped 16% from 2013. The central bank cited an increase in direct purchases from websites overseas, tuitions for students studying abroad, and a jump in overseas travel. Korean spending on overseas travel had been rising since last July, when it first hit a record of $1.8 billion. Their overseas expenditures reached an all-time high of over $1.9 billion this January, up 17% from the same period last year. The central bank said that over 1.8 million Koreans traveled outside Korea in January as a weak Japanese yen and low oil prices facilitated overseas trips. Experts say the low oil prices drove down airline ticket prices, giving travelers a wider selection of low-cost carriers. Experts also expressed concerns about Koreans' reluctance to spend money at home while their spending outside of Korea continues to rise. To address the problem of a sluggish domestic economy, they urge measures to attract more foreigners to boost the domestic economy. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, the burden on Korea's shrinking working population to support the elderly has increased at a worrying rate in recent years. According to statistics released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday, the burden of the working age population, people from 15 to 64, has more than tripled over the last 4 decades. This year, the ratio of working age people to people over the age of 65 is estimated to be 100 to 18. Now, that figure is the highest since related records began all the way back in 1970. In 1975, just to give you some comparison, the ratio was roughly 100 to 6. Experts warn that if the aging of society continues in tandem with the country's exceedingly low birth rate, it's going to have a devastating effect on the economy. They suggest increasing women's economic participation by creating a more flexible work environment and expanding childcare services. Korea's leading automaker Hyundai Motor appears to be having quite a hard time on its own home turf as imported brands continue to make inroads here. A Hyundai official speaking on the condition of anonymity says the company's market share in Korea sank below 40% in January. The official notes it could drop even further in February since there were fewer work days due to the Lunar New Year holiday. Hyundai's market share last year stood at roughly 41%, while its affiliate Kia Motors stood at 28%. That's the first time their combined market share has dropped below 70% since Hyundai and Kia merged in 1998. Hyundai attributed its falling market share to the increased presence of foreign brands, improved performances by its domestic rivals, and its own lack of new model launches in 2014. Now, feeling angry from time to time is perfectly natural, but flying into an uncontrollable rage can be a sign of a bigger underlying mental problem. Now, people who fall into this state on a regular basis are often diagnosed with a personality or behavioural disorder. Now, as you might imagine, young men are the most prone to getting very angry to these kind of disorders. But there are a number of ways to channel this negative energy into a more positive way of mind. Our Kim Min-ji has more.
A man recently drove his car into his girlfriend for breaking up with them. And another became violent in the middle of a highway tunnel after another driver did not give way to him. These are just a couple of cases that show individuals failing to control their anger. The intense rush of uncontrollable rage is normally linked to some kind of personality or behavioral disorder. A recent study revealed that out of 13,000 people who were treated for such disorders last year, 2/3 were under 30 years old. What's especially interesting is that, although the overall number of patients hasn't changed much in recent years, the proportion of men in their 20s jumped 13% over the past 5 years.
This might be due to young patients feeling they were not rewarded enough for their efforts during their teens, and the anger and frustration builds up. They can feel no regrets about their bursts of anger, as they feel they have the right to be angry.
Personality or behavioral disorders are not only characterized by angry outbursts. People with interpersonal problems and those who refuse to believe they have done anything wrong in certain situations may also have a disorder. Doctors say that finding a healthy and undisruptive way to release built-up anger and stress is key to alleviating such disorders. Taking the anger out on other people actually increases the frustration and can sometimes lead to bigger, even legal problems. Experts say the best approach is to focus on relatively strenuous activities like hiking or running, or having a hobby to focus on. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the global headlines. We're following this Tuesday lunchtime. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center.
So, Eunice, a major offensive is underway in Iraq to take back the strategic city of Tikrit from Islamic State militants.
Yeah, that's right, Jin-joo. It is a massive operation with a force numbering in the tens of thousands, and victory would be crucial in future plans to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, also under IS control. Our Son Jung-in has this story.
The thunderous sounds of artillery and warplanes were heard outside Tikrit as Iraqi forces attacked Islamic State strongholds in the northern province of Salahuddin.
We prepared these weapons to dislodge the extremists from Tikrit.
The Iraqi Prime Minister ordered forces to regain the territory and to avoid killing civilians.
Our goal is to release the ordinary people from oppression and terror threats from IS. We must protect the lives of civilians and the property in the city.
The massive operation to retake Tikrit from the IS group is reportedly made up of some 30,000 soldiers. The Saddam Hussein's hometown fell into the hands of the extremist group last summer. The Iraqi military commander of the Salahuddin region, Abdul Wahab Asadi, told state television that the operation was going as planned. Latest reports say Iraqi forces have seized at least 2 districts near Tikrit. The number of casualties is still being verified. Unlike other anti-IS operations in Iraq and Syria, the United States is taking a back seat this time, as Iraq did not ask for any support or U.S. involvement. Instead, Iran's military is playing a significant role in helping Iraq drive the Islamic State militants from Tikrit. Capturing the town is viewed as crucial in any future plans to retake Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, also under IS control.
U.S. military officials have said that mission could be launched as early as April. 손정인, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has issued a warning to pro-Russia separatists in eastern Ukraine against a piecemeal adoption of the truce in place. At the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, he said rebels were only pulling heavy weapons from parts of the front line. His Russian counterpart, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, meanwhile cited tangible progress on the ground. Kerry said Russia would face further economic sanctions if the ceasefire was not implemented in full, while expressing optimism that that would be completed in, quote, hours, certainly not more than days. OSCE monitors have said it was too early to confirm that either side had withdrawn their heavy weaponry in full. And as John Kerry was opening a new round of talks with his Iranian counterpart in Geneva to hammer out a framework for a nuclear deal ahead of a deadline later this month, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in Washington preparing to make his case before U.S. Congress squarely against it. The Israeli leader addressed a pro-Israel lobbying group on Monday that he had the moral obligation to speak up against a nuclear Iran that would pose as a threat to his country's survival. He also underlined that his speech was not meant to disrespect U.S. President Barack Obama in any way. And finally, the number of billionaires is on the rise, and joining them this year is NBA star Michael Jordan. The former Chicago Bulls shooting guard was one of 290 new faces on Forbes magazine's Rich list, following the footsteps of technology guru Bill Gates, who topped the list this year for the 16th time, where tech entrepreneurs from Uber, Airbnb, and Snapchat all under the age of 40. China was the country with the largest class of new billionaires, adding 71 to its list, followed by the U.S., India, and Germany. Meanwhile, Korea's Eoh Jin-joo, chairman of Samsung Group, came in at number 110, down 8 slots from last year.
Well, it snowed heavily during the morning rush hour here in Seoul. It has stopped for now, but we could see more precipitation as we have rain in the forecast till the late in the evening. But the good news is that most parts of the capital region, including here in Seoul, will have less than 5 millimeters of precipitation. But upper parts of the Gyeonggi-do province, like Ujeongbu and Dongducheon, could see up to 20 millimeters, and some parts of Gangwon-do province could see some heavy snowfall up to 7 centimeters. And as for today's readings, the daytime high here in the capital will climb up to 6, while the top temperatures in Daegu and Gwangju will peak at 10 and 9, and Busan will top out at 9 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 12-9, while Dokdo peaks at 7. Now the rain will trigger another cold snap, bringing the low to -5 here in the capital, and it seems like the chilly weather will continue till the end of the week. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that does it for this edition of Newsline at Noon.
Yes, join us again at the same time on Wednesday if you can. Until then, goodbye.